Hi everyone, my name is Demi. Welcome to another video in my series, Everything is Trying to Kill Us. Now, many people don't know that beef is one of the reasons countries fight. I know that sounds crazy. Beef is one of the reasons countries beef, but that is the reality. When it comes to trade disputes, trading beef between North American countries and countries in the EU remains one of the most contentious issues that you will find out there. As a matter of fact, when I was doing this research and I went into research repositories and I was trying to understand the process through which beef was made, a lot of the articles I found talked about trade. They were talking about US trade with the EU, US trade with some other country, and even Canadian trade has been pulled into the fray. So, what exactly is the beef that's causing the beef between these countries? In North America, it is very common for cows to be injected with exogenous hormones to increase lean muscle production. This is a way to reduce cost of meat production for the farmer and to increase the yield, obviously, that they will get per cow. But in the EU, this is a process that's not accepted because the EU has something in place called the precautionary principle. The precautionary principle simply says that if something is likely to cause risk to the public, even if there is no full scientific evidence that it will cause risk, it is better to avoid using it. For that reason, the EU, the US, and Canada struggle when it comes to trading beef. But that's not what I want to talk about because even though I enjoy those conversations about trade disputes and policy, I really want to talk about why this beef is causing beef. In North America, it is very common that cows, like I said, are injected with exogenous hormones. These hormones are either steroid in nature or non steroids. They are often naturally occurring hormones or synthetic ones that are very similar to what we produce. And some of them even include estrogen and progesterone. Now, for a long time, this was regarded as safe. And as a matter of fact, if you speak to any meat producer, they will tell you that, of course, this is safe. We do not think that there are any traces of these hormones once they get into the cows and the meat is cooked and you eat them. But is that really true? When I started to dig into studies, I found a study that basically said that a lot of the standards these conclusions are based on outdated methods of measuring whether or not these hormones remain in beef. The study basically said that the methods that were used were completely inadequate, and there is no way for us to tell for sure that beef that is produced through exogenous hormone injection is safe for consumption. The study also found that there was no way to measure whether or not these hormones produced certain metabolites within the body once they got there. And because we cannot measure it, we cannot say for sure what exactly is happening. So perhaps you might not have the actual hormone as measurable in the beef once the cow's been injected and it's been prepared for consumption, but there might be other metabolites that have resulted from the cow basically absorbing these hormones that we don't measure because we don't know them. That study piqued my interest, and so I started to dig even deeper to understand what it is exactly about beef that we don't know. The first thing I found was that exogenous hormones, even though they are generally regarded as safe by food administrations and regulators, are not harmless. A lot of them are either agonists or antagonists. An agonist is basically a compound that goes into your body and it can bind to a receptor in your body. So think about it. As a woman, you produce a lot of estrogen, progesterone. These hormones have impact on your body because they can bind to receptors. When you take in other agonists that look like them and act like them and can occupy the space of those receptors, you can easily disrupt the flow of your system. And hormone synthesis in the body is a carefully regulated system and process, and any tiny change in that process can set things off in the wrong direction. So think about consuming meat that might have agonists in them. These agonists can bind to the receptors that your naturally produced hormones are supposed to bind to, and it might send a signal to your body to say, you're making too much of this hormone, and your body thinks, okay, well, I guess I have to wind things down. And so you might find that for some women, they're not producing enough of certain hormones, and for some of them, they just have ridiculously high levels of these hormones. Another finding that's been reported is that eating red meat that has been treated with exogenous hormones can expose you to a higher concentration of estrogen than is required. And this, I think, is something that women who live with endometriosis can absolutely relate to, because you have probably seen the reports that say that endometriosis seems to be in a high estrogen environment. And so trying to reduce your estrogen production, or perhaps even increasing your progesterone production, might be a way to combat the effects. But if you're eating red meat, you probably want to be looking at how your red meat is being produced. Another finding that I thought was quite disturbing was the fact that red meat that's been treated with exogenous hormones can also cause early puberty in children. Again, because this is an association, like I said, even I am willing to stand behind it and say there's no way for us to know for sure that that is it. But it might be concerning, the same way I find it concerning that eating red meat does increase your chances of endometriosis. My point here is that it might not be red meat in and of itself that is the problem, but again, going back to the means of production that we use when we are making food. A lot of the foods that we eat these days are ultra processed, modified in some way to either increase our pleasure when we eat them or to increase benefits to those who produce them. Injecting exogenous hormones has also been related to cancer. Particularly, the use of estradiol in beef cattle has also been associated with cancer. All this to say that there are papers out there that suggest that something is absolutely wrong with the red meat that we eat, particularly in North America. And that raises the question as to whether or not red meat in and of itself is the problem. In my next video, I will share some more thoughts on this topic with you.